Emily had always been the kind of woman who seemed to have it all. She was smart, beautiful, and came from a well-to-do family that valued tradition and stability. Her life was like a carefully woven tapestry, everything in its place, every thread perfectly aligned. For years she'd dreamed of her wedding day, imagining herself walking down the aisle in a flowing white gown, surrounded by loved ones, with Richard, her fiancé, waiting for her at the altar. It was supposed to be the fairy tale ending she'd always wanted. Richard had entered her life 3 years ago, charming and confident with an air of sophistication that made Emily feel like the luckiest woman alive. He was everything her parents had hoped for, a successful businessman, well-mannered, and from a respectable family. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon they were planning their future together. The engagement announcement brought joy to everyone around them, and Emily threw herself into preparing for the big day. From choosing the perfect flowers to designing invitations, she poured her heart into making sure everything would be flawless. But life has a way of unraveling even the most meticulously planned tapestries. One fateful evening, just 2 months before the wedding, Emily's world came crashing down. She arrived home unexpectedly early after forgetting her phone during a lunch date with friends. As she opened the door to her apartment, laughter echoed from inside, laughter that didn't belong to her. Following the sound, she found herself standing in the doorway of her living room, frozen in disbelief. There, on the couch where she and Richard often sat together, were Richard and Sarah, her best friends since childhood, locked in an intimate embrace. The sight hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced as fragments of recent conversations replayed in her head. The missed calls, the vague excuses, the sudden distance between her and Richard. All the signs had been there, but she had chosen to ignore them, convincing herself that nothing could possibly go wrong. Now, confronted with the undeniable truth, she felt a mix of emotions: shock, betrayal, and overwhelming humiliation. What is this?" Emily stammered, her voice trembling. Richard and Sarah sprang apart, guilt etched across their faces. Richard tried to explain, his words stumbling over each other, but Emily couldn't hear him. Her vision blurred with tears as she grabbed her bag and fled the apartment, leaving behind the shattered remnants of her dreams. The days that followed were a blur of pain and isolation. Emily canceled the wedding plans, returned gifts sent by guests, and avoided answering calls or messages from anyone. Friends and family tried reaching out, offering sympathy and support, but she pushed them away, too ashamed to face the world. Social media became unbearable. Every post about relationships or engagements felt like salt in an open wound. Even stepping outside felt daunting, knowing people might whisper about how she'd been left at the altar, or worse, pity her. To cope, Emily sought solace in places where no one knew her story. She spent hours wandering aimlessly through parks, losing herself in the rhythm of city streets, or sitting quietly in coffee shops, staring blankly at untouched cups of tea. It was during one such outing, at a small cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown, that fate intervened in the form of Daniel. Daniel wasn't someone you'd notice right away. He blended into the background wearing faded jeans and a worn-out jacket. His hands were calloused from hard work, and his dark hair was slightly messy, as if he hadn't bothered combing it that morning. Yet, there was something comforting about him, an aura of calmness that stood out amidst the chaos of Emily's life. When their eyes met accidentally as she reached for sugar packets, he smiled softly, nodding in acknowledgement. Curiosity got the better of Emily, and she struck up a conversation. At first, it was nothing more than polite chit-chat. He asked how her day was going, and she replied vaguely, not wanting to reveal too much. But as they talked, Daniel's genuine interest began to shine through. Unlike others who tiptoed around her obvious sadness, he listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and sharing bits of his own struggles. He spoke about working multiple jobs to make ends meet, about finding joy in simple things like fixing broken furniture or watching sunsets. There was no pretense in him, no hidden agenda, just sincerity. By the time Emily left the cafe that evening, she realized she hadn't thought about Richard or Sarah once during their conversation. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of peace. Over the next few days, she found herself returning to the same cafe, hoping to bump into Daniel again. And each time they met, their bond grew stronger. They laughed over shared jokes, debated favorite books, and exchanged stories about their lives. Slowly but surely, Daniel became a lifeline for Emily, a reminder that not everyone in the world was cruel or selfish. One rainy afternoon, after several glasses of wine loosened her inhibitions, Emily blurted out something she never expected to say. "You know," she said half-jokingly, "maybe I should just marry you instead." The words hung in the air, heavy with awkwardness. Daniel stared at her for a moment, then chuckled nervously. "If that's what you want," he replied, surprising both of them. What started as a drunken joke soon spiraled into an impulsive decision neither could fully explain. By the end of the night, they were standing in front of a neon-lit chapel in Las Vegas, exchanging vows under the watchful eyes of an Elvis impersonator. As dawn broke over the glittering cityscape, Emily woke up beside Daniel, her head pounding and her heart racing. Had she really gone through with it? Was this some surreal dream born out of desperation? Looking at Daniel, still asleep beside her, she wondered what lay ahead. Little did she know, her whirlwind marriage was only the beginning of a journey filled with unexpected twists and secrets far greater than she could imagine. The morning after their impulsive wedding in Las Vegas was a blur of confusion and disbelief for Emily. As sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of their motel room, she sat up slowly, her head throbbing from the previous night's indulgence. Beside her, Daniel stirred, his face peaceful in sleep. For a moment, she simply stared at him, trying to reconcile the man she barely knew with the reality that they were now legally married. Her mind raced with questions. What had possessed her to say such a thing? Why had Daniel agreed so readily? And most importantly, what came next? Daniel woke up soon after, rubbing his eyes and squinting against the brightness of the room. When he saw Emily sitting there, wide-eyed and silent, he gave a sheepish smile. "Well," he said, his voice rough from sleep, "I guess we really did it." His tone was light, almost teasing, but Emily couldn't find it in herself to laugh. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, groaning softly. "Daniel, this is insane," she muttered. "We barely know each other. What were we thinking?" He leaned back on the pillows, looking thoughtful. "Honestly, I think we weren't thinking at all. But here we are." He paused, then added with a shrug, "If you want, we can call it off, get an annulment or whatever." Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to jump at the idea. After all, this whole thing had been a reckless mistake born out of heartbreak and too much wine. Yet another part of her felt strangely reluctant to undo what they'd done. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Whatever it was, she found herself shaking her head. "No," she said finally. "Let's not rush into anything. Let's see where this goes." And so, their unconventional marriage began. Not with grand plans or heartfelt declarations, but with a mutual agreement to take things one day at a time. Over the next few days, Emily and Daniel returned to their normal lives, though nothing about their situation felt normal. Back home, Emily moved some of her belongings into Daniel's modest apartment, a cramped space above a small grocery store that smelled faintly of spices and old wood. The contrast between his lifestyle and hers was stark. While Emily had grown up in a sprawling suburban house filled with expensive furnishings, Daniel lived humbly, with mismatched furniture and second-hand appliances. It wasn't dirty or unpleasant, just simple. At first, Emily struggled to adjust. She missed the luxury of her parents' home, the convenience of having help with chores, and the comfort of knowing exactly where everything belonged. Here, dishes piled up in the sink because Daniel didn't own a dishwasher, and the shower head dripped constantly despite his attempts to fix it. Even the bed creaked whenever she turned over at night. Everything felt foreign, overwhelming, and slightly frustrating. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. Emily started noticing little things that made Daniel's life special. Despite his limited means, he took immense pride in his work. Whether he was repairing a neighbor's broken cabinet or painting a mural for a local community center, he approached every task with care and dedication. He often came home covered in dust or paint splatters, yet his smile never faded. "It's not about the money," he told her once when she asked why he worked so hard for so little pay. "It's about making a difference, even if it's small." His attitude began to rub off on her. Slowly, Emily stopped focusing on what she lacked and started appreciating what she had. She learned how to cook basic meals using ingredients from the grocery store downstairs, and she even tried her hand at helping Daniel with some of his projects. One afternoon, while sanding down an old chair he was restoring, she realized how therapeutic it felt to create something with her own hands. For the first time in months, she felt useful, not like a victim of circumstance, but like someone capable of contributing. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, lying beside Daniel in the narrow bed, Emily would wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Who marries someone they barely know? What if Daniel turned out to be completely different from the person she thought he was? These thoughts kept her awake, staring at the ceiling until exhaustion finally claimed her. One evening, as they sat together on the couch eating takeout noodles, Emily decided to broach the subject. "Daniel," she began tentatively, "do you ever feel like we don't really know each other?" He glanced at her, setting down his chopsticks. "Yeah, sometimes," he admitted. "But isn't that kind of the point? We're figuring it out as we go." "I guess," she said, frowning. "But don't you think it's weird that we haven't talked about certain things, like your family, for example, or what you want out of life?" Daniel's expression grew guarded, and for a brief moment, Emily regretted bringing it up. Then, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "You're right," he said quietly. "There's stuff I haven't told you. Stuff I'm not ready to talk about yet." "What kind of stuff?" she pressed, unable to hide her curiosity. "It's complicated," he replied evasively. "Look, I promise I'll tell you everything eventually, just not now, okay?" Though his answer frustrated her, Emily nodded reluctantly. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he had valid reasons for keeping secrets. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Daniel wasn't being entirely truthful. Despite these lingering doubts, their relationship continued to evolve. They fell into a routine of sorts, spending their evenings watching movies or taking walks around the neighborhood. On weekends, they explored the city together, discovering hidden gems like rooftop gardens and quirky bookstores. With each passing day, Emily found herself growing closer to Daniel, drawn to his kindness and quiet strength. Yet, no matter how much fun they had or how comfortable she became in his presence, the nagging question remained. Who was Daniel really? Was he just a struggling handyman trying to make ends meet? Or was there more to him than met the eye? Emily didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. Her whirlwind marriage was turning into something far more complex than she'd ever imagined. And as much as she tried to ignore it, she knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. As weeks turned into months, Emily and Daniel's life together began to settle into a rhythm. Their apartment, though small and modest, started to feel like home. Emily hung up some framed photos she'd brought from her parents' house, a mix of family portraits and candid shots from happier times, and Daniel added his own touches, like the hand-carved wooden shelf he built for their books. Together, they created a space that reflected both of them, practical yet warm, simple yet full of character. Emily had grown accustomed to Daniel's frugal lifestyle, learning to appreciate the little joys it offered. For instance, instead of buying expensive coffee from trendy cafes, they brewed their own at home using beans Daniel ground by hand. On weekends, they visited flea markets where Emily discovered a knack for bargaining, and Daniel found treasures like vintage tools and old records. These outings became something they looked forward to, a chance to explore the city and share stories about their childhoods. But as much as Emily enjoyed these moments, there were still aspects of Daniel's life that puzzled her. He worked odd hours, often disappearing early in the morning and returning late at night. When she asked about his schedule, he would shrug and say vaguely, "Just helping out around town." Occasionally, someone would stop him on the street to thank him for fixing a leaky roof or repairing a broken fence, but no one ever mentioned anything beyond his handyman work. It was as if Daniel existed solely within the confines of their neighborhood, content to live quietly and unnoticed. One evening, as they sat on the couch eating dinner, Emily decided to press him again. "Daniel," she said, setting her plate. "Aside, I've been thinking, don't you ever want more? I mean, you're so talented. You could probably get a better paying job somewhere else." He smiled faintly, his eyes avoiding hers. "This is enough for me," he replied. "I like what I do. It keeps me busy and I'm good at it." "But isn't it hard?" she persisted. "Living paycheck to paycheck, never knowing when the next job will come along?" "It's not perfect," he admitted, "but it's honest work, and besides..." He trailed off, his voice softening. "Money isn't everything." Emily frowned, sensing that he was holding back. She wanted to push further to demand answers, but she stopped herself. Instead, she changed the subject, steering the conversation toward lighter topics. Still, the question lingered in her mind. Why was Daniel so determined to live such a humble existence? The cracks in their seemingly peaceful routine began to show when strange occurrences started happening around them. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Emily noticed a sleek black car parked outside their building. It wasn't unusual for cars to pass through the area, but this one stayed for hours, its engine idling silently. When she pointed it out to Daniel later, he dismissed it casually, saying it was probably just a delivery driver taking a break. But the same car reappeared the next day, and the day after that. Then there were the phone calls. At first, Emily assumed they were from clients or acquaintances, but Daniel always answered them in hushed tones, stepping away to talk privately. Once she overheard him say something about keeping a low profile, before hanging up abruptly. When she asked who it was, he brushed it off, claiming it was nothing important. The final straw came one rainy evening when a courier arrived with a large envelope addressed to Daniel. Curious, Emily peeked inside while Daniel was in the shower. To her astonishment, the envelope contained stacks of cash, enough to cover several months' rent. Her heart raced as she quickly closed it and placed it back where she'd found it. By the time Daniel emerged from the bathroom, she was sitting, stiffly on the couch, her mind spinning with questions. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing her tense posture. "Nothing," she lied, forcing a smile. But inside, she felt betrayed. How could he keep something like this from her? Who was he really? That night, unable to sleep, Emily confronted him. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to know what's going on. The car outside, the phone calls, the money. I can't ignore it anymore. Are you in trouble? Is someone after you?" For a long moment, Daniel didn't respond. Then he sighed heavily and sat down beside her, running a hand through his hair. "Emily," he began, his tone serious, "there are things about me I haven't told you. Things I wanted to keep hidden because I didn't want them to change how you see me." "Change how I see you?" she echoed, incredulous. "Daniel, you're my husband. Don't you think I deserve to know the truth?" "I do," he said earnestly. "But I was scared that if you knew the real me, you wouldn't stay, his." Words sent a chill down her spine. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. Taking a deep breath, Daniel finally confessed. "I'm not just a handyman, Emily. My family, we're wealthy, very wealthy. I grew up with everything money could buy, but it came at a cost. People only cared about what I could give them, not who I was. So when I turned 18, I left that world behind. I wanted to live simply, to prove that I could stand on my own 2 feet without relying on my family's name or fortune." Emily stared at him, stunned. "You're rich?" she stammered. "And you didn't tell me?" "Wanted someone to love me for who I am," he explained, his eyes pleading. "Not for what I have. That's why I've been living like this, for years now. I thought maybe If I kept it hidden long enough, I could build a life based on honesty and trust. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she absorbed his words. Part of her understood why he'd done it. To escape the superficiality and greed that often accompanied wealth, but another part of her felt blindsided. How could he expect her to trust him when he'd kept such a huge part of himself concealed? "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't process all of this right now." Nodding solemnly, Daniel stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the rain-soaked streets below. Emily watched him, her heart torn between anger and compassion. She had married him impulsively, drawn to his simplicity and sincerity. Now, she realized that beneath that simplicity lay a complexity she hadn't anticipated. The revelation forced her to confront her own feelings. Did she love Daniel for who he truly was, or for the version of him she thought she knew? Was their marriage built on solid ground, or was it destined to crumble under the weight of secrets? As the storm raged outside, Emily knew one thing for certain: their relationship would never be the same again. The days following Daniel's revelation were some of the hardest Emily had ever faced. She felt like she was walking through a fog, unsure of which direction to take or what to believe. On one hand, she admired Daniel's desire to live authentically and escape the shadow of his wealth. On the other, she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. He had lied to her not just once but repeatedly about something so fundamental to who he was. It wasn't just the money, it was the secrecy, the deliberate choice to hide a part of himself that shaped his entire life. Unable to stay in the apartment with Daniel without feeling suffocated by unanswered questions, Emily decided to leave for a while. She packed a small bag, told him she needed space, and returned to her parents' house. At first, they welcomed her back with open arms, relieved to see their daughter after months of worrying about her well-being. But as soon as they learned about Daniel's true identity, and the fact that he was secretly a millionaire, they became skeptical. "Emily, are you sure this isn't another mistake?" her mother asked gently during breakfast one morning. "You've been through so much already. First Richard, now this. Are you certain Daniel is being honest with you?" "I don't know," Emily admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "That's the problem. I want to trust him, but how can I when he kept such a big secret from me? What if there's more he's not telling me?" Her father chimed in, his tone firmer. "Money changes people, sweetheart. Even good ones. Just be careful before you decide what to do next." Their words weighed heavily on her, adding to the turmoil inside her mind. Was Daniel truly different from everyone else? Or was his wealth simply a ticking time bomb waiting to explode their fragile relationship? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Meanwhile, Richard, her ex-fiancé, re-entered her life unexpectedly. He showed up at her parents' doorstep one evening looking contrite and apologetic. When Emily opened the door and saw him standing there, her initial reaction was anger. How dare he come here after everything he'd done? "Emily, please," Richard said quickly, holding up his hands. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking for." Against her better judgment, she let him in, closing the door behind them. They sat in the living room, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Richard launched into an explanation, claiming he regretted ending their engagement and wanted to make things right. He blamed Sarah for seducing him, insisting that he had made a terrible mistake and still loved Emily deeply. "I messed up," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I swear I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. We can start over, Emily. You and me, together." For a fleeting moment, Emily considered his words. Life with Richard would be predictable, stable, and familiar. There would be no secrets, no surprises, no complications. But then she remembered why their relationship had fallen apart in the first place. His dishonesty, his lack of respect for her feelings, and his inability to resist temptation. Could she really go back to someone who had hurt her so deeply? "No," she said firmly, standing up. "I can't do this again, Richard. You had your chance, and you blew it. I deserve better than someone who treats me like an option instead of a priority." Richard looked devastated, but Emily didn't care. She walked him to the door and closed it firmly behind him, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. As flawed as her marriage to Daniel might be, at least he had never intentionally tried to hurt her. His lies stemmed from fear, not malice, a distinction that mattered more than she realized. Back at the apartment, Daniel was grappling with his own emotions. Losing Emily, even temporarily, was harder than he'd anticipated. For weeks, he threw himself into his work, taking on extra projects and staying busy to distract himself. Yet every night he found himself staring at the empty side of the bed, wondering if she would ever come back. One evening, as he was fixing a broken window for an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, she noticed the sadness in his eyes. "Something's troubling you, dear," she said kindly. "Want to talk about it?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Over cups of tea in her cozy kitchen, he poured out his heart, confessing everything. From his decision to leave his wealthy upbringing behind, to his fears of losing Emily forever. Mrs. Thompson listened patiently, nodding occasionally as he spoke. "You know," she said finally, "love isn't about perfection. It's about two imperfect people choosing to stand by each other despite their flaws. If you love her, and I mean really love her, you'll fight for her. Show her that your intentions are pure, even if your methods weren't." Her words struck a chord with Daniel. That night he sat down and wrote Emily a heartfelt letter, explaining his perspective and promising to be completely transparent moving forward. He included details about his family, his past, and the reasons he had chosen to live modestly. Then he drove to her parents' house and left the letter on their doorstep, hoping it would reach her. When Emily read the letter the next morning, tears streamed down her face. Daniel's words resonated deeply with her, reminding her of why she had fallen for him in the first place. Despite his mistakes, he was genuine, kind, and willing to change. More importantly, he loved her, not for what she could offer him, but for who she was. After much deliberation, Emily decided to give their marriage another chance, but only under one condition: total honesty. She called Daniel and asked to meet him at the cafe where they had first connected. When she arrived, he was already there, looking nervous but hopeful. "I got your letter," she said softly, sitting across from him. "And I appreciate your apology. But if we're going to make this work, you have to promise me no more secrets. None. Not ever again." "I promise," Daniel replied earnestly, reaching for her hand. "From now on, you'll know everything. No more hiding, no more lies." Emily studied his face, searching for any trace of deceit. Finding none, she smiled faintly. "Okay," she said. "Let's try again." As they left the cafe together, holding hands, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. Their journey was far from over, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. But for the first time, they were facing them together, with truth, trust, and a shared commitment to building a future worth fighting for. Rebuilding trust wasn't easy, but Emily and Daniel approached it with determination. They decided to start fresh, agreeing to be completely open with each other about everything, no matter how uncomfortable or difficult the conversation might be. For Daniel, this meant finally stepping out of the shadows he had lived in for so long. He began by introducing Emily to his family, a step that terrified him almost as much as it intrigued her. The first meeting took place at a luxurious estate nestled in the countryside, a far cry from the modest apartment they shared. As their car pulled up the winding driveway, Emily couldn't help but feel intimidated. The mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur overwhelming. Servants greeted them at the door, ushering them into a sprawling living room where Daniel's parents waited. His mother, elegant and poised, wore an expression that was equal parts curiosity and skepticism. His father, a tall man with sharp features, exuded authority and reserve. "Emily," Daniel said gently as they stood in the doorway, "these are my parents." The introductions were polite but strained. It quickly became clear that Daniel's decision to leave his privileged life behind hadn't sat well with his family, especially his father. "So," his father said after a brief silence, You've chosen to marry someone who knows nothing of our world. Tell me, Emily, do you even understand what you're getting yourself into? Emily felt her cheeks flush with heat, but she held her ground. With all due respect, sir, she replied steadily, I may not know your world, but I do know Daniel, or at least I'm learning to. And if there's one thing I've realized, it's that wealth doesn't define a person. What matters is how they treat others. Her response seemed to catch his father off guard, and though he didn't say much more during their visit, Emily noticed a flicker of respect in his eyes. Over time, these interactions grew less tense, and Emily worked hard to prove herself, not because she wanted their approval, but because she wanted to show Daniel that she could handle whatever challenges came with being part of his life. Indir. Addition to reconnecting with his family, Daniel also started sharing glimpses of his past with Emily. He told her stories about growing up in a world where material possessions ruled every decision, where friendships were often transactional, and where love was rarely unconditional. He explained why he had chosen to distance himself from that environment, emphasizing his desire to live authentically and make a real impact on people's lives. I don't want my wealth to define me, he confessed one evening as they sat together on the couch. But I also don't want to run away from it anymore. If we're going to build a future together, I need to find a balance, a way to use what I have for good without losing myself in the process. Emily nodded thoughtfully. She admired his perspective and encouraged him to pursue projects that aligned with his values. Together, they brainstormed ideas for using his resources to help those in need. One idea stood out above the rest: creating a foundation aimed at supporting struggling families and individuals. Inspired by their own journey, they envisioned a program that would provide financial assistance, mentorship, and practical tools to empower people to rebuild their lives. As plans for the foundation took shape, Emily found herself growing closer to Daniel than ever before. Working side by side gave them a sense of purpose, strengthening their bond in ways neither had anticipated. They spent hours discussing strategies, meeting with advisors, and visiting communities that could benefit from their efforts. Through it all, Emily marveled at how much Daniel cared, not just about her but about making a difference in the world. Their newfound partnership wasn't without its challenges, however. Old habits die hard, and Daniel occasionally slipped back into secretive behavior, particularly when dealing with sensitive matters involving his family. Once, Emily discovered that he had quietly settled a debt for a neighbor without telling her. While she appreciated his generosity, she reminded him that transparency was key to rebuilding their trust. You can't keep doing things like this behind my back, she said firmly. Even if your intentions are good, it makes me question whether you truly value our agreement. Daniel apologized sincerely, acknowledging that he still had work to do. You're right, he admitted. It's not fair to you, and I promise to do better. Slowly but surely, Daniel learned to let Emily in on every aspect of his life, no matter how big or small. In return, Emily continued to support him unconditionally, proving that her love wasn't contingent on his wealth or status. Their relationship evolved into something deeper and more meaningful, a partnership built on mutual respect, honesty, and shared goals. One day, as they walked through a park near their home, Emily paused to watch children playing on the swings. A smile tugged at her lips as she turned to Daniel. Do you think we'll ever have kids? She asked softly. He looked at her, surprised by the question but touched by its sincerity. I'd like that, he said after a moment, but only if we're ready, and only if we agree to raise them differently. No silver spoons, no entitled attitudes, just kindness, humility, and a strong sense of responsibility. Emily laughed lightly. Deal, she said, reaching for his hand. By the time their foundation launched, Emily and Daniel had transformed not only their own lives, but also the lives of countless others. At the launch event, held in a beautifully decorated ballroom, Emily stood beside Daniel as he delivered a heartfelt speech about second chances and the importance of giving back. When he finished, the crowd erupted into applause, and Emily felt a swell of pride knowing that she had played a role in bringing this vision to life. Later that night, as they danced under twinkling lights, Emily rested her head against Daniel's shoulder. "We've come a long way," she murmured. "We have," he agreed, holding her close. "And we still have a lot to learn. But as long as we face it together, I think we'll be okay." For the first time in a long time, Emily believed him. Their marriage might have started with lies and uncertainty, but it had grown into something real and enduring. Together, they had proven that love, true love, could overcome even the greatest obstacles. As months turned into years, Emily and Daniel's life together blossomed in ways neither of them could have imagined. Their foundation, aptly named Second Chances, became a beacon of hope for countless families struggling to get back on their feet. What started as a small initiative grew into a nationwide movement, inspiring others to contribute their time, skills, and resources. From providing affordable housing to offering educational scholarships, the foundation touched lives across communities, earning recognition not just for its impact, but also for the genuine compassion behind it. For Emily, working alongside Daniel on the foundation brought a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She discovered strengths within herself that she didn't know existed: her ability to connect with people, her knack for organizing events, and her talent for rallying support. Together, they traveled to different cities, meeting beneficiaries and hearing their stories. Each encounter reinforced their belief that everyone deserved a fair shot at a better life, regardless of where they came from or what challenges they faced. Daniel, too, found joy in this new chapter of his life. For so long, he had grappled with guilt over his privilege, feeling like an outsider in both worlds, the one he left behind and the one he tried to build. But through the foundation, he finally felt aligned with his values. He used his wealth not to flaunt power but to uplift others, proving to himself and to Emily that money could be a force for good when wielded responsibly. Their partnership extended beyond the foundation and into every aspect of their daily lives. They learned to navigate the complexities of blending two vastly different worlds: Daniel's opulent upbringing and Emily's more grounded background. At first, there were moments of friction, like when Emily struggled to adjust to formal dinners at Daniel's parents' estate, or when Daniel felt out of place at Emily's family gatherings. But over time, they found balance, teaching each other the beauty of compromise and understanding. One evening, after hosting a charity gala at their newly purchased home, a modest yet elegant property that reflected their shared tastes, Emily and Daniel sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house was quiet now, save for the soft hum of crickets in the distance. It was a rare moment of calm amidst their busy lives. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully, breaking the silence, "I never imagined my life would turn out like this." "Like what?" Daniel asked, turning to look at her. She smiled softly. "Happy, fulfilled, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Me neither. If you'd told me a few years ago that I'd end up married to someone as incredible as you, running a foundation that actually makes a difference, I wouldn't have believed it." They both laughed, reflecting on how far they'd come since that fateful night in Las Vegas. What had begun as a reckless decision fueled by heartbreak and loneliness had transformed into something profound, a testament to the resilience of love and the power of growth. The following year marked another milestone in their journey: the arrival of their first child. A baby girl named Lily, whose laughter filled their home with warmth and light. Becoming parents deepened their bond even further, giving them a shared purpose that transcended anything they had experienced before. They vowed to raise Lily with the same principles they lived by: kindness, humility, and gratitude, shielding her from the pitfalls of entitlement while instilling in her a strong sense of responsibility toward others. Watching Daniel interact with Lily brought tears to Emily's eyes. He was patient and gentle, always willing to drop whatever he was doing to play with her or read her a bedtime story. In those moments, Emily realized how much Daniel had grown, not just as a husband, but as a person. His past no longer defined him. Instead, it shaped him into someone capable of immense love and generosity. Their relationship wasn't without its challenges, of course. There were still days when old insecurities resurfaced, particularly when Daniel's family occasionally voiced disapproval of certain decisions they made. But Emily and Daniel faced these hurdles together, leaning on each other for strength and reminding themselves why they had chosen this path in the first place. One day, during a family vacation to a serene lakeside cabin, Emily sat by the water, watching Lily splash around happily under Daniel's watchful eye. As she observed them, a wave of contentment washed over her. Life hadn't been easy, and their journey hadn't followed a straight line. But every twist and turn had led them here, to a place of peace, love, and purpose. Later that evening, as they gathered around a crackling fire, Emily spoke the words that had been lingering in her heart for some time. "Daniel," she began, her voice steady yet full of emotion, "I want to thank you." "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For everything. For trusting me enough to let me in. For fighting for us when things got tough. And for showing me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other again and again, no matter what." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "No, Emily," he whispered. "Thank you. For seeing me for who I am. For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And for making me a better man." As they sat together under a blanket of stars, holding hands and listening to the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, Emily knew they had built something extraordinary. Their marriage might have started with mistakes and secrets, but it had grown into a partnership rooted in trust, honesty, and unwavering commitment. And as they looked toward the future, with Lily giggling beside them and dreams of helping others stretching endlessly ahead, they knew they were ready for whatever lay beyond. In the end, Emily realized that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to grow with you, to face the storms and celebrate the sunshine, and to choose you every single day. With Daniel by her side, she knew she had found exactly that.